"Don't leave me here," the widow begged. The cowboy turned back in silence. The widow's voice cracked the silence like a whip. "Don't leave me here," she begged, her fingers clutching the worn wood of the porch rail. The cowboy froze mid-step, one boot still hanging above the dust. He didn't turn. The wind carried her words down the empty street, scattering them among the broken shutters and silent hitching posts. It was the kind of plea that dug into a man's ribs, a voice you could ride miles to forget, but never quite outrun. He had saddled his horse at dawn, intending to ride west before the sun cleared the ridgeline. The town behind him had been burned hollow by grief, hers most of all. Folks still whispered about the ambush, about the night her husband fell out on Salt Creek Road, his blood drying fast beneath the cold stars. The widow wore black still, though her face was pale as unbleached linen. Cole Hartwell had buried men before, plenty of them. He had carried their bodies home, stared into their wives' eyes, taken the sharp edges of their sorrow. But this time the widow didn't just want a coffin lowered or a prayer mumbled. She wanted him, a man who had spent a lifetime turning his back on ties, letting the trail take what it would. He finally turned, slow, as if the dust itself resisted the motion. Their eyes met. Hers were swollen, ringed in sleepless red. His, shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, betrayed nothing but the wear of too many miles. "You can't stay," she whispered again. Softer this time, but heavier somehow. The sound of a lone church bell drifted through town. Someone somewhere was digging another grave. Cole's jaw tightened. He wasn't meant to stay in places like this, wasn't meant to soften into another man's shoes. He carried ghosts already. His brothers, his captains, men who had followed him into the border country and never come back. Yet her plea lingered. It didn't belong to the morning air or the cracked boards of her porch. It belonged to him now. He lowered his foot, the creak of leather loud in the stillness. The widow's hand slipped from the rail, trembling, as if afraid she had said too much. Then came the sound. Hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, echoing down the main street like a clock counting out doom. Cole's eyes narrowed beneath his hat brim, fixing on the figure riding closer through the morning haze. The rider came slow, reins loose, like a man who already owned the ground his horse touched. Dust clung to his coat, his hat pulled low, but even from a distance Cole knew the type. Deliberate, watchful, carrying trouble like a badge. The widow's breath caught sharp behind him, though she tried to quiet it. Cole shifted his weight, one hand hovering near the colt at his side. The town was too empty for strangers to arrive unnoticed. Whoever came wasn't here for a drink or supplies. The horse clopped to a halt in front of the widow's porch. The rider didn't dismount. He just leaned forward, voice a low growl. "Name's Pike. I'm looking for the man that rode with Holt's gang down Salt Creek." The widow stiffened, her hands gripping the porch rail again. Cole's eyes didn't leave Pike's. "Holt's dead," Cole said flatly. Pike's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Dead men don't bury themselves." Someone carried him back. Someone who knew which way to ride. "That someone owes me answers." Silence hung heavy. The widow's eyes pleaded with Cole not to speak, not to tether himself to her misfortune. He felt the weight of it, her husband's death, the rumors, this vulture of a man circling what was left. Cole had two choices, as sharp as the edges of a blade. He could deny knowing anything, mount up, and leave her to face Pike's hunger for blood. Or he could stay, knowing full well that staying meant trouble, bullets, and ghosts clawing out of the dust. His voice came low, steady. "Rancher's widow's been through enough. You want to dig up Holt, you do it yourself." Pike's eyes flicked toward the woman, then back to Cole. "That so?" The air felt thinner, the morning light harsher. Pike's hand rested casually on his saddle horn, but Cole noticed the revolver tied low at his hip. A man like that didn't ride alone either. Somewhere out in the hills, others were waiting. The widow's hand brushed Cole's sleeve. Barely a touch, but enough. Her voice came faint. "Don't leave me here." And Cole realized leaving was no longer an option. Not without breaking something inside himself that had already been chipped too many times. He gave her the faintest nod, a promise without words. From down the street came another sound. Doors opening. Whispers. The first stirrings of townsfolk drawn to the scent of trouble. And above it all, from the far ridge, a second column of riders appeared, their silhouettes black against the brightening sky. "Best you think hard about where you stand," Pike muttered. tugging his reins as the riders on the ridge began to descend, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Cole's hand lingered near his revolver, but he didn't draw. Not yet. The sound of hooves multiplied, filling the narrow main street with a pounding rhythm that rattled the windows of shuttered stores. The widow stepped back against the porch post, her breath shallow, eyes darting between Cole and the tightening noose of men riding in. By the time Pike's partners reached the ground, there were 6 of them, dust-scarred, rifles across their saddles, faces marked by the kind of hunger only violence feeds. They fanned out, blocking both ends of the street, cutting off any thought of flight. The leader among them, broad-shouldered and scarred across the cheek, spat into the dirt before speaking. "You're Cole Hartwell. Rode with Holt in the border days." Cole's jaw worked once, but he gave no answer. The man's grin showed yellow teeth. "Thought so. Holt talked about you when the fire burned low. Said if there was one man he'd ride with again, it'd be you. Shame you put him in the ground." A low murmur rippled through the gang, half accusation, half admiration. Cole let the words hang. The truth was murkier than they knew. Holt had chosen his fate, and Cole had carried him home because no one else would. The widow's voice broke the silence. "Leave him be. Holt's death ain't his burden alone." Scarface's gaze slid to her, sharp as a knife point. "Widow still breathing?" Holt would have hated that. He laughed, but the sound held no mirth. Pike smirked along, watching Cole for a twitch, a move, any slip of control. Cole spoke then, quiet but firm. "You boys came here for blood. Just know the ground's thirsty, but it don't much care whose it drinks." That earned him stillness. No laughter now, no shifting saddles. Just the creak of leather, the dry rasp of wind through broken shutters. Scarface leaned forward. "Then we'll test that theory." In the space of a heartbeat, rifles slid from scabbards, revolvers loosened in holsters. Cole's thumb brushed the worn grip of his Colt. The widow clutched the porch post tighter, whispering something only the wind could hear. And then a church bell rang again, louder this time, as if the town itself knew what was coming. The first shot cracked the silence. The crack of gunfire tore through the morning, shattering glass and sending townsfolk scrambling into doorways. Cole dove for cover beside the water trough, the widow ducking low behind the porch rail. Splinters flew as bullets chewed through wood, each impact closer than the last. Smoke drifted down the street, the acrid tang of powder filling the air. Cole's Colt barked twice, dropping one rider from his saddle. The others scattered, fanning out, their shouts echoing off the false-fronted buildings. Between bursts of gunfire, silence crept in, heavy and strange. Cole crawled toward the porch, his coat brushing dirt, and found himself face to face with the widow crouched behind the splintered boards. Her eyes were wide but not wild, steady in a way that surprised him. "You should have left," she whispered. Her voice trembling but firm. "Could have," Cole answered, sliding a fresh cartridge into his revolver. "Didn't." Her hand found his arm, clinging not with desperation, but with something quieter, trust. For a moment the gunfire beyond them faded, replaced by the sound of her breathing, the flicker of resolve in her gaze. "I ain't got much left," she admitted. "House is near gone, fields dry, but I won't let them take the last of it. Not while I'm standing." Cole studied her, the grit in her voice, the steel beneath her sorrow. He saw not just a widow, but a survivor, one who'd been dealt cruelty and still chose to rise against it. He gave her a short nod, a soldier's salute without words. Bullets snapped overhead, breaking the fragile quiet. Cole shifted, peering out from cover. Pike's men had pulled back to regroup, their voices carrying across the street in rough argument. He caught phrases: "Circle wide, burn her out, Hartwell's mine." The widow touched her throat, then reached into her skirt pocket. She pulled out a small locket, the silver tarnished, the chain broken. She pressed it into Cole's palm, her hand lingering. "It was his," she said softly. "Holt gave it to me when he swore he'd always come back. Keep it, or throw it in the dirt. I just can't carry it no more." Cole closed his hand around the locket, feeling its cold weight. A token of loyalty, betrayal, or something in between. He couldn't yet tell. But in her eyes he saw the unspoken plea. Don't let his death be the end of me too. Outside, a shadow moved across the rooftops. Pike's voice rang out, sharp and merciless. "Burn the widow's place. Smoke him out." The widow's hand tightened on Cole's arm. Her eyes, steady and unblinking, held his. "Then we fight," she whispered. The order went out, and the gang moved like wolves, circling the widow's house with torches snatched from the livery. Flames licked dry boards, smoke curling skyward. The crackle of fire mixed with the whistle of bullets as Pike barked commands. Cole rose from cover, the locket still heavy in his palm. He shoved it into his vest and leveled his Colt. 2 shots rang, sharp and sure. 1 torch dropped into the dirt. Another man staggered back, clutching his chest. The street filled with shouts, the chaos splitting the riders' unity. The widow had armed herself with her late husband's rifle, its stock worn but steady in her hands. She fired from the porch, her shot clipping a rider's hat clean off his head, sending him tumbling backward. For a heartbeat, Cole almost smiled. She wasn't begging now. She was standing tall, Pike snarled, spurring his horse straight down the middle of the street, revolver blazing. Cole stepped out into the open, bullets snapping past. The world narrowed to the rhythm of boots on dirt, the heat of fire, and the grim certainty that only one of them would leave standing. The final exchange was fast, brutal. Pike's revolver barked once, the bullet grazing Cole's arm. Cole steadied his Colt, exhaled slow and fired. Pike jerked hard in the saddle, his revolver falling from limp fingers before he crashed to the ground. Silence followed, heavy as a church prayer. The remaining riders wavered, leaderless. Some cursed, some spat, but one by one they turned their horses and rode, the dust of their departure rising like smoke after a storm. Cole lowered his weapon, blood seeping from his sleeve. The widow hurried to his side, steadying him with hands that no longer trembled. Behind them the fire smoldered but hadn't claimed the house, just blackened scars against its frame. "You stayed," she said, voice raw. He met her eyes. Couldn't ride on. For the first time since he'd seen her, she let a tear fall, not from despair but release. She looked at the sky, the smoke, the road where the gang had vanished. Then back at him. In the days that followed, the town stirred again, whispering the tale of how Pike's gang had been broken, how a widow and a weary cowboy had held the line. Some said Cole left soon after, vanishing down the trail like dust in the wind. Others swore he lingered, mending fences beside her, the locket still tucked close to his heart. Years later, when the widow sat in her rocking chair beneath a calmer sky, she would remember that morning, not for the fire or the gunfire, but for the sound of boots returning when she thought all hope was gone, and the last image burned into memory, a lone saddle resting in the dusk light, empty but not abandoned, its shadow stretching long across the porch.